'Twas brillig as you walk the paths along the roots of Pike's Peak. The slithy toves are gyring and gimbling in the waves. Turning toward the Anselm Society digital pub, you notice how outgrave the Malmraths are. Inside the pub is a raucous conversation on arts, faith, and which Vorpal blade can best go snicker-snack. In the corner, by the fire, are 4 people. One of them is reciting nonsense poetry and really hoping everyone caught his reference to the poem Jabberwocky by Lewis Carroll. And that's me, your host, Matthew Mellema, and welcome to Believe to See, a podcast of the Anselm Society Arts Guild. The Anselm Society is a coalition of churches across the Front Range of Colorado dedicated to one very simple goal, a renaissance of the Christian imagination. To further this goal, we do all sorts of things. Each spring, we all know, COVID permitting, et cetera, we have our big Imagination Redeemed conference, and that conference attracts folks from all across the country. We also have a regular slate of concerts, lectures, and other events designed to foster love and understanding of arts and faith. And we have our own Guild of Artists right here in Colorado Springs. That's right, there's still some guilds out there, and we do stuff. And when our guild isn't creating art, some of us like to podcast. Therefore, we have Believe to See. To find out more about the Anselm Society, please visit us at anselmsociety.org. And since you're doing Anselm stuff, why don't you hop on to wherever you get your podcasts, whether that's Spotify, Stitcher, or wherever, and rate and review the show. We really love and appreciate your 5-star reviews. I've already told you about how they make my day, and I appreciate them. And it's a great way to increase the visibility of the show. And with all that said, now let's go to the poem Jabberwocky, which I think I've mentioned on this show before, is one of my favorites. And it's a master nonsense poem by Lewis Carroll. And one of the characters in it is the frumious Bandersnatch. And those of you who run in Anselmy or Rabbit Roomy circles will probably recognize Bandersnatch because in addition to being a character in the poem, it's also the title of a book by Diana Glyer, which is extremely popular, again, in the Anselm and Rabbit Room circles. I was actually given it at a recent Anselm conference because, it really captures a lot of what we're doing there. Diana Glyer is super popular. She's spoken at our conferences before. It's great. So you will understand then why I was excited when I was scrolling through my Facebook feed a while back and saw that there was something called Bandersnatch Books that was getting ready to launch. I was like, oh, okay, this looks interesting. So I start clicking through like their Facebook page, see the founders, what sort of stuff they're having, and instantly there's one of those, we obviously have to have them on the show. So reached out and all 3 of them agreed to be on, which I'm super excited about. So Carrie, Annie, Beth, Rachel, all of you, welcome to the table. I'm really, really happy to have you here.
Thanks. You. It's fun to be here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks for the invite.
Absolutely. So I want to talk about Bandersnatch Books, why you started it, what kinds of books you're looking for, your plans going forward, all of that. But first of all, let's sort of go down the line here. Tell us a little bit about you and sort of work you do, especially as it relates to the bookish parts of your work. Let's start with you, Carrie.
Okay. Hi, I'm Carrie Givens, and I like books. If you were to walk into my living room, you would probably find this out very quickly by the fact that there is an entire wall of bookshelves and 2 cats named Lord Peter Wimsey and Harriet Vane. So if you didn't notice, I like books. I'm a writer, I'm an editor, and I work in communications, doing a lot of stuff with words. And I have always loved the publishing world and what I've known about it. And over the years have learned more. And we'll talk a little bit more later about how that all led together to become Bandersnatch. But for me, it really comes from a place of loving books and knowing that there are some really, really great books out there that in the current world of publishing aren't going to get easily seen, and wanting to be part of making those visible.
All right. Well, I will say that a huge percentage of the Anselm writers who are associated with us just went, yep, we hear you, with that whole thing about overlooked books. So already glad to have you on. Amy Beth, same question. Tell us a little bit about yourself and your book work.
So I am a lifelong reader, and I have always wanted to be an author as well, which I did in the past, a little bit of writing work. And I also am a mom of 4 kids, and I have a lot of my fingers are in a lot of different pies. I have a nonprofit, work for the family business, do project management. So with Bandersnatch, a lot of what I'm doing reflects the contract work that I do in my other job, which deals with project management, brand management, finances, that sort of thing. But yes, I'm also an author, and look forward to being published with Bandersnatch as well.
All right, someone with author skills and management skills. Oh man, that is like the unicorn out there. Usually, all of us author types like, oh, I need someone who can like get things done and manage stuff. Okay, so Rachel, same question. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, I grew up loving books. I was an avid reader. My mom had a hard time keeping up with my appetite for books, and so it was a lot of trips to the library. I had a lot of experience in journalism in high school, and back then I thought the coolest job in the world would be to be a photojournalist for National Geographic. I just thought that was the coolest thing. So I got into hobby photography and then became an English major in college. Got married in college, and my husband and I moved overseas to Spain, and we did overseas mission work through a nonprofit organization in southern Spain, working with immigrant populations, those at risk of marginalization. We were there for the first dozen years of our marriage, and then transitioned back near his family here in North Carolina. We're right outside Charlotte, and now he is helping to run the family greenhouse business. And so in all that time, all of my English studies had just been kind of on the back burner. All of my attention was on a second language. And once we settled back in the US, I took a week, the beginning of 2017, did a week-long media fast, really seeking what God had for me and the kids in this new season of life when I had no purpose outside the four walls of our home. And that's when the writing started. And it started with poetry, and then an idea for a series of stories, which has kind of blossomed into a novel, came soon after that. And so that's what I've been doing. I homeschool our 4 kids, and usually when other people are sleeping, I'm writing. And so I published my first book of poetry, self-published my first book last year. It was a collection of poems for moms in the trenches like me. I'm currently working on a second book, and never really thought I would be into publishing, but just a love of the written word and the texture and smell of books. It's one of those things that I take much delight in, especially when a book is well made, when there is attention to detail in even the small things like the copyright page. Like those things matter to me. And so it's a delight to get to think that we get to put something into the world that other people can enjoy in that same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can only imagine the feeling of you're working in a second language for years and years, and you get back to America and you're like, hey, I can write in my native language. I just know this. It's so much easier.
Yes.
All the rules are intuitive to me. Okay.
It is.
So I want to talk about the founding of Bandersnatch Books. But before we do that, I'd like to get y'all's takes on the publishing landscape. Because I'll tell you my experience as someone, I refer to myself as a pre-successful novelist. And there's a lot of other people in that same category, and Anselm, who I've talked to and who've been on the show, who are like, I have this book. It's written from, my worldview as a Christian, but it doesn't fit in that Christian bucket. So now it's not Christian enough for Christian publishers, but it's too Christian for secular publishers. And it just gets sort of in this limbo. And I'm picking up some vibes from you that you all have had the same experience. So I was wondering if you could talk about your sort of survey of the publishing industry before you founded Bandersnatch, maybe some of the gaps and opportunities you've seen in it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've like I said, been interested in the world for a long time, and I've been pretty closely paying attention since like 2008, 2009. I finished grad school thinking, I could look for a job in the publishing industry. And my final semester of grad school, the publishing industry imploded. We had a recession, and we went from, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of small indie publishers out there to 5.
That weren't they small. They later got bought out by like Penguin and Random House, right? Yeah.
Right, exactly. And so, suddenly like I was looking and going, there's nothing for me. And so the Lord, led me in other directions for a day job. But then over the years I've watched and, between economic change and new opportunities in publishing, self-publishing being something that you can do well. It's not just creating junk, and you can do print on demand, and you can do that at a pretty high level. Like there's a lot of options that are out there now for the individual to get their work out. But the individual, like you mentioned earlier, Matt, is not necessarily the person with the skill set to do that. And so as we looked out at the publishing landscape, I think kind of the gaps that we saw were that in-between space, that space of tension, both between a Christian worldview and a general market, and also between genre. That, if you are trying to publish within traditional publishing, you have to fit into the right boxes. And if you don't, and if your work doesn't, they don't know how to talk about it. They don't know how to market it. They don't know how to sell it. So those, I think, were the two biggest gaps we saw. And there are some great publishers out there that are, stepping into those gaps. Mm-hmm. But like Bandersnatch, they're small. And so, so I know between, any connections I have with the Rabbit Room or with Anselm Society or with Annie, Beth, and Rachel, I know so many writers that are producing incredible work that is really, if they choose to self-publish it, it is the cream of the crop of what is out there in what can be the morass of the self-published world. But there's not enough places for it to be published. So that, from my perspective, was one of the undergirding pieces. Yeah.
No, that's absolutely 100% makes sense. And yeah, I could, again, like what all you were saying, it sounds like you're you're talking in a guild meeting for the Anselm Society, because like all of us writers like, oh, what do I do? We're in this in-between place. And so we're all like, yeah, we know.
I was going to add to what Carrie said, is that, if you're creating traditional publishing, your agents always want comp titles, not just any old comp title, by the way, like a super popular, bestseller comp title. And a lot of times the books that we're looking at aren't going to have those kinds of comp titles because they are their own thing, or yeah.
Yeah. It's the question of, well, what would be next to your book on the shelf? And it's like, well,
nothing.
I haven't seen anything else like mine.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, well, I can't really find anything a lot like it. Then there's this awkward silence. I'll see myself out. Thank you.
Exactly.
So into this landscape, which it sounds like we all have similar experiences with it, you decided to launch Bandersnatch. So how did you get together and do this? So it sounds like you all have known each other for longer. When did you decide, hey, with our powers combined, we can launch actual book publishers?
Yeah, so Annie, Beth, and I are sisters-in-law, in case you couldn't tell by our last name.
I inferred, but I did not want to assume.
Right. We married brothers, and so we've been longtime friends. And I actually met Carrie through the Rabbit Room. When I started writing, I thought, okay, now it's time to actually get involved and start fostering relationships. And so I met Carrie through the forum in the Rabbit Room. And then we met in person for coffee and hit it off and became fast friends. And from the beginning, we're talking about each other's work, and we were reading each other's work and giving feedback. And then we had the idea of starting a writer's brunch together in conjunction with Arts Charlotte. And so Carrie would host the brunch, but at my house. And so we did that about once a quarter, I think, for a while. And then from that, there was one meeting where there were 5 of us present who all had works in progress, who were interested in starting a critique group, something just to share our work in progress, get some feedback. So we started meeting with that group about once a month. And then we would just, read a chapter or two, a little bit based on, so the first thing we did was read Diana Gleyer's Bandersnatch, and thought we read that book together, and we discussed it at our first meeting and talked about what we wanted our interactions to be like. And then we just dove in, and we would, who's got a chapter for us this week? And a lot like the Inklings. And we would read a chapter or two and just get some feedback. And it was really formative. And in the course of that, I think we had been doing that for about a year. When the quarantine hit, we got together for kind of one big socially distanced Bandersnatch meeting. And we were reading our works to each other. And then Carrie just kind of tossed out the idea. And, well, I've had this idea, I've thought about it. And then maybe I'll let you take it from there, Carrie.
Yeah. Well, I was chatting with a friend recently, and I joked, we were saying, how many organizations and businesses have started because you went home and checked whether the domain name was available, and it was. Because really, coming out of that meeting that day, and this was, sometime this past summer, I literally kind of came home and went, Bandersnatch Books would be a good publishing company name. Mm-hmm. I wonder if, and it was. And so I grabbed the domain. And yeah, so we then started talking about it with the three of us. And
wait, Carrie forgot my favorite part of the story. So not only did she grab the domain, she was grabbing the social handles as well. And I love Twitter.
I work in communications. I know how this works.
So I got a notification that my friend Bandersnatch Books was now on Twitter. And so I immediately wrote to Carrie and I was like, wait, is this a thing?
I think the message said, are we starting a publishing company?
Yeah. And the answer was, sure.
Yeah. So that was really the start of it. And then, we got ourselves together and began to think through. And I think one of the things we realized was the skill sets that we all brought to the table. Not only did we bring this love of books and our own books and a desire to support authors, we also brought skill sets to the table. I know how to do page layout. Annie Beth knows how to do marketing. Rachel is such a creative thinker and so tuned into beauty and making something excellent and taking something from, okay, this is good, to making it excellent. So kind of all of those skills together, like we were saying, so many times the author is not the person who has those skills. So between the three of us, we can really come alongside an author, and we also know people who do the things we don't do.
Yes.
That is great to hear. A couple of quick thoughts along those points. One, I totally hear what you're saying with all the social media handles, and I like to make a message to the guy who has the handle believed to see on Twitter. You know who you are. I know you only have like 20 followers and you tweet about whatever from Austin. Like, come on, just let me have the handle. Come on. So that's where we get the founding. So before we take the next step, I want to take a half step back and talk about the book Bandersnatch, because like I said, it is one of the books with the highest approval rating in Anselm circles. Sounds like it was formative for you guys too. So maybe for those listeners who haven't heard it or haven't read it, where does the name Bandersnatch come from, and what did Diana Gleyer had to say that you all found so motivating for you on this?
Yeah. So I heard Diana speak at the Rabbit Room Hutchmoot conference a few years back, and then got to meet her again at the Anselm Imagination Redeemed conference. And we started a joke that for some reason I always wind up at Diana's elbow. And the summer or the spring, later that spring, like 3 weeks after I went to the Anselm conference, I actually was in the UK and visited the Kilns, C.S. Lewis's home. And I sat down in the living room during the tour and sat down in a little chair and looked at the bookshelf next to me, and literally at my elbow was the book Bandersnatch. And I was like, oh my goodness, it's true. So yeah, I mean, Diana's work is such an incredible dive into how the Inklings influenced one another. And the quote that she starts with for the title is Lewis saying about Tolkien, "No one can influence Tolkien. You might as well try to influence a Bandersnatch." I'm probably paraphrasing that a little, but that's the gist of it. And so that's where her title comes from. And then the book itself, if anybody's not familiar with it, she just goes through chapter by chapter, kind of different ways that the Inklings influence one another. So through encouragement, through critique, through, I don't really have it in front of me to remember all the chapters. And then at the end of each chapter has how to do what the Inklings did, which is just such a helpful, like, make it practical kind of thing. And so for us, that name started with Diana's book, but then having it rooted in Lewis Carroll and just the delight and silliness and honestly outside of the boxness of Alice, I think ties into what we're thinking about as well. Yeah. Any Beth and Rachel, other thoughts on that?
No, I totally agree. I think one of the things that our website says is that we look for hidden treasures found off the beaten path. And so, right, the whole Wonderland is also, it's a story of things off the beaten path.
It is. Definitely.
Quite a rabbit hole, so to speak, yeah. All right, and before we go on, I just have to read the first two stanzas of Jabberwocky. I have to. I'm sorry.
Yes, by all means.
'Twas brillig, and the slithy toves did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the momraths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the frumious Bandersnatch. So I'm just happy to know that if Bandersnatch Books hadn't been around, you could have gone with Jubjub Books. I don't know if that would have had the same effect, but I'm sure it's open.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so do you remember the old ending to Return of the Jedi when the Ewoks used to sing the song?
Yes!
I'm pretty sure the lyric is Jubjub. It's something along those lines. So,
Hey, there we go. That can be like some sort of smaller indie publishing house within Bandersnatch down the road.
It'll be our sci-fi arm.
An imprint.
Yeah, an imprint. Look up the domain, Carrie. Hurry up.
Okay.
You better grab it quick. So now let's go to talking about some of the logistics of starting a publishing company. So you talked about these initial talks that you have, and you realize, hey, your skill sets, they're complementary, that this could work well together. But what are the logistics of actually getting this off the ground? Especially, it sounds like you guys were just getting this off the ground as the COVID shutdowns are hitting. So what did that all look like?
Right. So like any artistic project, there's the creative part, which is fun. And then there's the boring stuff. But actually, if you enjoy the boring stuff, it's not boring. So yay for me. Right? So what you really have to do with starting a small publishing company is what you would have to do with starting any new small business, which is start your business the right way at the beginning. Unfortunately, a lot of folks who start businesses kind of jump in, and I am totally a build the plane while flying it person, and I will admit that, but I'm a build the plane while flying it person while holding the directions.
I love that.
Yeah, it's totally me. So the first step is, obviously form your LLC or whatever type of company that you want to be forming. Make sure that you don't skip the steps of making your outline for your business plan. So we, before we're doing anything, we're sitting there making our business plan and choosing our values and choosing our goals for the next year, the next 3 years, the next 10 years, and so on. There are the other tedious things that one has to do, like make sure you have your bank account set up and that you are able to keep your finances separate from, your expenses are going to be able to be separate from what's coming in and those sorts of things. Don't just throw it all in one account and then be like, I'll figure it out at the end of the year. You won't. Okay. Not happening. So those types of details, but then also there's the outreach. Carrie has done a great job since she snagged those social handles of doing what I call pre-launch. There's launching, there's pre-launching, and there's pre-launching. So pre-launching is you talk it up, we're about to be pre-launching. And then in 2021, we'll actually launch. So that's pretty much what it involves. And now just making good choices as we go forward and balancing how much work we take on and making sure we can keep the quality consistent by having a slow start and then increasing as we have the capacity.
That makes sense. And I'm glad you said that, Annie Beth, because I will tell you I'm the sort of person, I love the big idea stage. I love like having the meeting over coffee, like, let's do this and this. But then it comes to actually doing something. I'm like, ooh, no, I need to make sure the plane is completely built. And I need to do like 20 different test runs before I'm going to risk flying this thing. So it's good to have you there to do that. So I'm curious for like Rachel and Carrie, do you have a similar build the plane while it's flying mentality, or are you different? And how did that work together?
I'm much more of a planner. Like in the top 5, the Strengths Finder test, one of my top 5 is strategic and another of mine is achiever. And so it's how I am made to, if I have something I want to do, to look far ahead and then make a plan for how to get there and then do that plan. Because if it's something that I think is worth the time, I'm going to put the time in and see it through. It's funny because when my husband and I started dating, my dad actually warned Mick, I guess. He said, you need to know that when Rachel starts something, she's going to follow through. And I didn't realize, what a strange thing to say. I didn't realize that he was trying to give Mick a heads up that, look, if you're going to be in this relationship, you better be serious. And so I think that just applies very broadly. But when we started talking about Bandersnatch, yes, I was 100% on board because I could see the value in it. I could see the skill sets, all the way the pieces fit. And it just got those creative juices flowing of ideas of how we can make this work and how we can make it very good.
Yeah. And I'd say I probably land in between Annie Beth and Rachel on that. Like, I'm a go-getter, but I'm also hesitant sometimes. If you're into Enneagram, I'm an 8-wing 9. So I basically constantly feel like I'm learning to drive a manual transmission car and just hitting the clutch and, pushing forward and then holding back and then pushing forward and then, pausing and looking at the big picture. So I think Annie Beth has stretched me, and we've had some good conversations about this too, where, there'll be something and, one of us will be like, where do we, but we also, one of our values is being honest and being open in our communication with one another. And so when it's something that somebody really does, Annie Beth often is the one going to push us forward first and has the willingness and has the permission from each of us to push. If it's something that, Rachel or I is really going to struggle with, we've got the openness and the ability to say, either educate me and bring me along or listen to my gut, on this. And I have a friend that she always likes to talk about her gut. And when she married her husband, he would, say things about, well, the spirit was leading me to, and she was like, I just, I don't sometimes know how to answer that. And I looked at her, I said, your gut is the Holy Spirit. She's like, oh, I hadn't thought of that. I was like, oh yes, you guys are talking about the same thing. You just have different words for it. And that's the thing, is sometimes, that hesitation is truly something that the Lord is saying, slow down, stop, pause, and I think having the accountability of friends in this to be able to say that. And then other times it's fear. And, again, that community allows you to kind of work through that and figure out how to move forward.
So really quickly, how did those dynamics work? I'm just curious with the COVID stuff, because, we can't have the sort of meetings with people that I'd assume you'd want to do ahead of time. There's all these special considerations. Has that really played a big role in your preparation for the launch, or are we just in a digital age and, whatever, Matt, you're being old fashioned?
Yeah.
So there's this really cool thing. Sorry. This might be a trade secret. I'm not sure. But there's this really cool thing called Zoom. Okay. Don't tell anybody.
It is an amazing thing.
We use it.
Yes. Yeah. We also, we are fortunate to live in North Carolina where the weather's nice, which I promise you in January, I will be angry that there's not snow, but in the spring and the fall, I'm really excited because we've been able to have some meetings, in person. And also all of us are pretty isolated, like within our own units. And so we have been able to feel comfortable when we've had contact with one another in person. But between some in-person distanced meetings and this wonderful thing called Zoom. And then also, like you said, we do live in a digital age. And so it's emails and it's Voxer and calls.
A shared drive on
a shared
Google
drive on Google. And just kind of getting the things up there and going from there. I'm sorry. My cat is trying to eat the cord. Lord Peter Wimsey, stop eating cords.
So I think Rachel and I'm sorry, it's Mick, Rachel's husband. I'm an INFJ, and I'm living the dream right now. Let me just say.
Yep.
Yeah, I'm definitely not an I.
Nope.
Yeah, I think a lot of us introverts, I'm a pretty severe introvert. I have had a lot of times like, I feel really bad for my extrovert friends. I'm cool just sitting on my couch and, like reading a book all day. But if you had to be around people, my goodness. But it sounds like you guys are all able to use the digital stuff to get that going. And that's great. So now let's talk about the next step. I'd imagine I've never founded a publishing house before, but the next step I'd imagine you'd want is to have the actual books that you're going to publish. So how did you go about choosing the titles that you're going with for your launch?
So we decided that since we're just kind of dipping our toes in the water, we wanted to start with our own works. All three of us have had works in progress. And so when we decided to start this publishing company, the initial thing was, well, instead of self-publishing each of our works, why don't we as a group publish each other's work? And so we get to combine our networks. We get to encourage each other and push each other a little farther along than we could do individually. But very quickly, we started daydreaming about, well, what more could we do? So beyond just the three of us, we have friends who are authors and we know of works in progress. And so it very quickly grew into a dream of doing something beyond ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. We've been having conversations with some of those people, just kind of checking in on, okay, so where are you at? And when could we talk? And then one that I'm excited that we get to talk about here is a connection that I initially made well over a year ago through Story Warren. I write with storywarren.com, and that's a website that's dedicated to families that are fostering holy imagination and the kids in their lives. John Summer is one of the regular contributors to Story Warren, and he and his wife reached out about me just doing an edit on a manuscript that John had. This is long before Bandersnatch Books became a thing, and I did a freelance edit for him. And so as we began to talk about Bandersnatch Books, he got back in touch saying, okay, so I'm beginning to think about, self-publishing and maybe doing a Kickstarter. And we all went, well,
funny you should mention that.
Yes, exactly. So we have now signed a contract with him and with his illustrator, who's another John Niner. And we're kind of working together with them. It's very, very much a partnership because they already had so many things that they were thinking about doing. So that'll be one of the books on the docket early on as well. And then we actually are getting ready to kind of launch a funnel for how do people let us know what they have. We are not capacity-wise at a point where we can say, hey, open submissions. But if we could get information about, okay, here's who I am, here's what my book is, here's, kind of the word count. Here's the state it's in, it's fully done. It's been edited by someone, blah, 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 blah. Then we could look at some of those and say, we want to talk to this person. We want to talk to this person. And so that's kind of the next thing that we're going to be launching probably before the end of 2020, just a way that people can sort of submit about themselves and their books so that we can start looking at those. And as Annie Beth mentioned, we're going to start small. One of the passages that has been part of our conversation from the very beginning is, help me with the reference, gals.
Zechariah.
It's
Zechariah.
Yeah, go ahead.
4:10. Yeah, Zechariah 4:10. And it says, do not despise small beginnings, for the Lord rejoices to see the work begin. And so we're excited to see where it goes, but we're also ready to take that one step at a time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I can guarantee you, as soon as you started talking about that next step, all the Anselm writers taking notes, all right, cool, let's get that. But look, before we get there, let's talk about what the steps you're on right now. So I'm kind of curious to see what kind of work you're working on. So you three, it's elevator pitch time. Tell us a little bit about the books you're working on. You don't need to give anything away for your launch, but roughly, what are you working on, and what was John working on that you thought it would fit so well with what you all are doing?
Yeah. Who wants to start?
Carrie, why don't you start? We can just
Okay.
do them in order of
There we
publishing.
go. Yeah. So my book is called Rosefire, and it's a YA fantasy, and it is the epitome of the book that is too Christian for the general market and not Christian enough for the Christian market. I literally have had editors say that to me about it. And it's been in the works since 2008, but the Lord hasn't ever taken it all the way, so any conversations I've had have always stalled out at some point. And so it's just sort of been with me for a long time. And it's a story about a kingdom that is in crisis and has lost its way and has lost sight of the ancient stories and the ancient ways of He who knows men's thinking, the Creator. And a young woman arrives on the doorstep of the narrator, whose name is Karen, and she has no memory of her past, and she has prodigious skill in magic, which is a sign from the ancient writings. And so that starts them on an adventure to discover kind of their own history and their own story and the truth, and to discover that kingdoms are not just forged in politics and power, but are also forged in hearts and minds. So that's Rosefire, and we're planning to launch a Kickstarter to fund that. That's one of the other things we haven't really talked about, but we're definitely looking at sort of a low overhead model as we prepare this, that we're going to be using Kickstarter. We're going to be using pre-ordering systems. We're going to be, especially as we start off, to kind of get these things going. But so yeah, we'll launch a Kickstarter early in 2021 and be getting that out. It's kind of exciting.
Mm-hmm.
All right, excellent. So that's elevator pitch number 1. Now let's do elevator pitch number 2.
I think I'm aiming to be elevator pitch number 2 because my target publishing date is going to be like May-ish, so late spring 2021. I have a middle grade mystery, and the story behind that is actually I wrote it years ago, and it had a different title and was really a different book, and I self-published it. And then it was almost on a whim. It was kind of for one of my children for their birthday. And I said, I'm going to write this book. And hey, I'm also going to put it on Amazon. And oh, hey, now I'm going to sell it to some people as a fundraiser for our local sports team and that sort of thing, wheelchair basketball. And then it turned out a lot of people liked it. And they were like, oh, when's the next one? And all this stuff. And I said, oh, you know what? Maybe I should have done that differently. So I actually pulled the original copy off Amazon. It no longer is available. And I rewrote it and, have been heavily editing it. I would say it's almost a completely different book, even though the storyline is the same. The book itself is very, very different than the original version. It'll be better. And so it's a middle grade mystery called No Clues, You Lose, a Joey Jacobs mystery. And the synopsis for that is, actually, I'll just tell you the synopsis. It says, when her wheelchair basketball team's uniforms go missing, Joey Jacobs takes the lead to solve the mystery with the help of her friends and family. In the process, she catches the perpetrator of a citywide crime spree and learns how to be a better team player on and off the court. So the unique thing about this book is that it is set locally. It's set in Charlotte, North Carolina, and it features our actual local wheelchair basketball team, not the actual, children, but the team itself. Mm-hmm. So there are little Easter eggs in there for people who live in North Carolina and like to recognize the place settings.
Mm-hmm. I love it. So we got YA fantasy, middle grade mystery. Love it. I'm actually a big fan of both those genres. So you're 2 for 2 with me. Now let's go to elevator pitch number 3.
All right. My book is going to be titled Beyond Chittering Cottage, Poems of Place. And it's basically a collection of poems that I've written over the past few years. So, we used to live overseas, and during our time living overseas, we moved an average of once a year. And so, we were just accustomed to that nomadic lifestyle. Anytime we were in the States, we were traveling, crisscrossing the U.S., the southern U.S., visiting churches, raising support. And so, settling in one place on one plot of land for 5 years straight is something new for us. And being at home with the children has given me a lot of time to look out the window and pay attention. And a lot of poetry has come out of that, just paying attention to the hummingbirds and to the orb weaver spiders and to the vines that grow in the greenhouse that we were tending this summer in the middle of quarantine. And the thorns, those smilax vines that I was fighting all summer long. I've gotten a lot of poetry out of these things because I've learned to pay attention long enough that I can start to see meaning behind the things that are visible, that there's this mystery that underlies everything. There's a deeper meaning. And I was reminded of the proverb that says, I looked upon a field and gained wisdom. And it's talking about how, the wall is crumbling and this lazy man and things have gone to ruin. And just looking upon, like he can learn just by observing. And so I think it's just that approach of paying attention and then the words just come. Ever since that first poem that I wrote back in 2017, I haven't been able to stop this flow of poetry. And so there are times that I will sit down and write, like I'll do the November Poem a Day Challenge through Writer's Digest. There's a group that I'm involved with online on Facebook called the Poetry Pub, which actually grew out of a group that shared poetry at the open mic at Hutchmoot a few years ago. And then we all connected online and we've been writing poetry together and doing some workshops and some things like that. And so every November we do the Poem a Day Challenge, doing the same prompts. And that has helped in just the craft this year. Some friends and I both attempted to do a new form every day, just trying our hand at different forms that we had not explored before. And so that has been a challenge. But so some of the poetry comes from that. And then some of it just comes from being inspired by the world around me. And so this collection will be about 40 poems of just things that have grown out of living in one place for an extended period of time and paying attention.
Awesome. Now, one small point along that. I'm really glad you put in a word in favor of the orb spider. There's an intense spider controversy in my house. Me and my 5-year-old son are very pro spider. My wife is anti spider. That is a very, very delicate thing. But I look forward to reading your poem to her to try to turn the tide. Yes. But
there we go.
Here's a fun fact about the orb weaver spider. Did you know that the only orb weavers who spin a web are the females? And did you know that orb weaver spiders will eat their webs?
Oh,
I did not know either of that.
I did not know until we observed it. During quarantine, we were sitting out on the back patio and there was this orb weaver spider that these gorgeous webs would be there first thing in the morning and then they would be gone. And then one morning I was sitting there having my cup of tea and I saw this spider begin to dismantle her web. She doesn't actually eat it. She has a special compartment where she puts the web to recycle it. And so I have actually a series of 3 poems about her. She is the artist who is not too precious with her work.
Oh, I like that. She's also into recycling.
There we go. There we go.
Exactly.
Have to respect that orb spider. So really quick now, we just have John's pitch. So which of you three would like to make the pitch on behalf of John, and why you thought his work would fit so well with your work?
I will do that since I'm the one who's read it the most. Been through it twice now, I think. So John's book is called Zao's Tales. That's Z-A-O. And it is a middle grade kind of fantasy adventure. It is set in northern Michigan. And the characters, I'm trying to pull up there we go. The characters are 4 sisters, and their mom, who open a storybook called Zao's Tales that is so wonderfully incredible and so real that it becomes. Let me read a sentence here about it. So it's not just an ordinary collection of fairy tales, as Carrie, Ella, and Lily are soon to find out. What starts as a normal afternoon read aloud with their mother spirals into a grand adventure when they unintentionally release an evil villain into the world. As their story unfolds, they will make new friends, face difficult challenges and choices, and in the end, be forced to answer the biggest question of all. Can they send the enemy back to her world? It is an absolutely delightful book, and I'm so excited to introduce these characters to the world through Bandersnatch and let everybody go on the adventure with them as they struggle against the enemy. So yeah, I think, it fit within kind of my interest areas, which is I love fantasy, I love middle grade, I love, YA. Those are all areas that are kind of my thing. I think we're kind of starting there. I don't know that we are locked in that that's the only kind of books we're publishing moving forward. I mean, obviously we have poetry as well, so that's outside the box. But, those are the worlds that we find ourselves in. So that's where we're starting.
Awesome. So that is really great to hear. You all went 4 for 4 with the pitches, so well done. I can tell you've been doing your homework. So we're running we're winding down the time, but before we go, just maybe if you could tell us what your immediate plans are, because I know you're done with the pre-launch, you're in the pre-launch. So when does the launch start? What can we expect then? And what do you see as the next steps beyond that launch?
Beth, you want to take point there?
Maybe. Well, we've been pre-launching, right? And so I would consider the actual pre-launch would be, we've been working on an email that is going to go out to our email subscribers. So if you're not on that list, you want to be, right? Be some of the first to know. And we're going to share with them some of the same things that we have shared here. And then, I don't know, have we actually talked about an official launch in 2021?
Yeah. Well, I think 2021, we're going to start with the Kickstarter for Rosefire. And that'll probably, some of it's how quickly can we get the ducks in order, but I'm thinking we're looking at probably late January for that. And that will be, just getting the funding really to pre-order the book. That's essentially how we're using the Kickstarter. Then we'll be getting that out. And again, we just need to map out exactly what the timeline is, but that'll be within the next couple of months after that. And then we'll be doing pre-orders for Annie Beth's book in the late spring and for Rachel's in the summer. And we might wind up with another reprint in there. That's another thing that we are passionate about, is books that are in the public domain that there aren't necessarily good quality copies of. You can go and find 16 versions of Anne of Green Gables on Amazon Create Space, but some of them have busty blondes in flannel shirts on the front cover. So, we would like, we're probably not going to do Anne, but, definitely those books that, there's a hole for good quality copies out there. And we'll go from there. And then probably Zeo's Tales, we're probably actually looking at first thing in 2022 simply because John lives in Ghana, West Africa, and he will be back in the US. And so we will be working with him on that. Of course, all of this is pending a pandemic, figuring out what it's doing. We hold all privately.
Right. We couldn't say, we're throwing some big launch party because right now we can't, we can only have 10 people in our room together. So pretty sure the police would come. So we're not launching. We are not launching.
We want to make it clear to the North Carolina authorities, these are virtual launches. We're all fine. Everything's above board. So it sounds like then the key because again, I am guessing a lot of the folks listening to this are the sort of folks who you're saying this yes, this is exactly the stuff I want to support. The stuff that's, not Christian-y enough for the Christian publishers, too Christian-y for the others. This is the stuff I want to support. I want to get behind this. So it sounds like the first step then is to get on the email list. So how would they go about doing that?
Yeah, bandersnatchbooks.com. And there's a button at the bottom that says, I want to sign up for emails. So that's a great place. And then follow us on social media. On Facebook, that's Bandersnatch Books. On Instagram, it's Bandersnatch Books. On Twitter, it's Bandersnatch BK, because like you, Matt, someone else had the fuller version of the title that I was looking for. He actually tried to give it to me, but he doesn't remember his login, and Twitter wouldn't let him close down the account. So our website is a great place to start, and we will also be selling books through our website. So that'll be a good way that as people are looking to support us, to do the pre-orders there or anything like that, if we can sell it directly to the user, then that means Amazon is not taking the majority of the profit. And that means that we can then publish more books.
And to that point, we would want to be very generous to our authors. So by buying directly from us, that supports that. Not that we wouldn't be generous if you buy through Amazon, because our rates are set. They are what they are. But it makes things better for everyone and allows us to pass that on to the artists when you buy direct.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. That all sounds great. So again, listeners, if you want to support, good books like this, the sort of stuff we've been wanting to see for a while, hop on the email list when this comes, support them, and, buy them directly through the website. Yeah, just take the steps to support the stuff we want to see. So Carrie, Annie, Beth, Rachel, thank you all so much. I am super psyched to see where this goes. Thank you all so much for being on the show.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for having
us. Talk to you, Matt.
Absolutely. Thank you. So as you listeners can probably tell, things are now winding down at the Anselm Society Digital Pub. Fire's down to embers, customers are trundling home, and you've polished off your final glass. Once again, Believe to See is a podcast of the Anselm Society. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll see you next time.